And all this is just in light of what we always talk about. Could we ever fight and also last this boil of corruption in the country? That's the probing question. And we just want to also ask ourselves, so many things have been happening. We want to put them in perspective. Yesterday also we had a very intense discussion around KAA and the takeover by KQ, where Parliament has made the right decision to stop the takeover of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport by the loss-making Kenya Airways. And the whole deal is shrouded in mystery, as we said yesterday, and sounds suspect. Recent revelations also have just confirmed our fears. The deal is being fronted and pushed by individuals or groups outside the orbit of the Airports Authority, raising questions about their motive. This week, or that is last week I should say, Kenya Airports Authority Managing Director Johnny Anderson categorically told Parliament's Public Investment Committee that the organization was never involved in the transaction. Neither did it originate the idea, nor was it ever consulted. Rather, the authority was railroaded into the transaction, to be sure. Mr. Anderson stated the authority was instructed by Principal Secretaries Paul Maringa and Esther Koimet to enter into the discussion with Kenya Airways, with the writer that the decision had been made by higher authorities. Who is this higher authority? That is the attendant question. Neither was KAA team given any written communication from the cabinet to validate it, or to validate, I should say, the directive. This is a stinker. First, KAA is a public entity with an independent body. If a decision is to be made on its ownership and operation, there must be a proper process that involves even parliamentary approval. Asking KAA to hand over management of the airport to another entity, in this case Kenya Airways, is a major decision that cannot be made casually. Airports are strategic assets and must be jealously guarded. Thus, the cabinet cannot purportedly issue directive on the takeover without following the correct procedure. Secondly, even if perchance the decision was to be made, Kenya Airways does not have the capacity and resources to manage airports. Kenya Airways has perennially been making losses. It went into a misguided expansion plan that saw it procure aircraft it did not need and entered into routes that did not make economic sense. The fuel pricing model it adopted, as well as ticket costing, were poorly crafted, and the result has been high operational cost and reduced passenger uptake. Simply put, it is a struggling entity and hence cannot be trusted with an entirely new business to manage. Today we take a look on this and a raft of other issues as well. And if you're joining us this morning also, this is what you will be paid or you paid for. You've been paying for a ticket, 21 billion shillings for empty tickets. There you go. The AG told Kerio Valley Development Authority, don't dare, but they went ahead and took a foreign bank loan of 61 billion shillings and they paid 21 billion shillings for a dam that has not been designed and even the bush has not been cleared. Now the bank or the banks are asking Kenyans to start serving the loan taken for a ticket. This story continues on page 4, 5 and 6 of the Daily Nation. We want to go quickly into the discussion with our panelists who are already here to just discuss Galana Kulalu and a raft of other issues as well with that ticket and many other issues also. Also, if you pick up the Standard today, 107 companies listed in cabinet kickback probe is another story that you also need to know. DCI boss George Kinoti vows to unravel multi-billion shilling bribe-taking claims by some CSs and names companies and directors that must meet officers today to shed light on the dealings with Italian firm facing probe. This is on page 6 of the Daily Nation, where it continues. Right, our panelists are already here in studio. Otende Amolo is with us, and he's a member of Parliament from Marietta. We have also Jacob Dio. Good to see you, sir. Right, you've recovered. You're on the mend, I think, the last 2 weeks.
I'm okay.
You okay? Good to see you. Welcome back. He's a former member of Parliament from Game also. We introduced earlier Senator Aaron Cheriot from Kericho, and Boni Kalwala is joining us this morning, who is the Deputy Leader of Ford Kenya, and also Kimani Matangi, who is a Senator from Kiambu. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Let's just begin with the Galana Kulalu project. We've heard that very comprehensive story there from Olive Barrows looking at the line. And I remember, is it 3 years back, we discussed Galana Kulalu here with Jacob Dio, Senator Kimani Matangi, Mithika Linturi as well, also Professor Hammond Manyura. And we were asking ourselves, is this a scandal in the waiting? And I remember you, Jacob Dio, asking a very probing question. Why was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here in the country and he never even attempted to go and see what is happening down there at Galana Kulalu?
Yes, I did. In fact, he had a mysterious meeting in the State House, then flew back to Israel. But I also asked Dibal that where were our priorities? At that time, there was no fertilizer, and there were no authentic seedlings in the North Rift. Why were we then? They told us we would invest 7 billion shillings, and they kept telling us of various figures until the last time I heard about it, it was 35 billion shillings. And the thing has never produced anything, which tells me that National Irrigation Board was culpable or is culpable in this scam. It is just a scam. There's no difference with it from the one you read on news of, or the one which is in the on the front page of the Nation,
yes,
where the taxpayer paid 25 billion shillings for a ticket. It was meant to siphon money, and I would not be surprised if Benjamin Netanyahu did not, being the Prime Minister of Israel, had no idea when he was here that the name of the country of Israel was being used to steal from Kenyans. Yeah.
Right. Let's hear from Senator Aaron Chiriot.
Well, I really wonder if there's anything more to add to this story other than what we have already said about it, that there's more than meets the eye. It's really unfortunate that it ends down to this, because it had been built up as Kenya's most ambitious irrigation project, and it was supposed to turn around things. Because I listened to presentations from cabinet secretaries, PSAs, and people who previously spoken with so much conviction about what we were going to achieve out of all this. The question that doesn't come out clear to me is where did we get it wrong, apart from the fact that, okay, we've heard about that money was not properly used, but even leave that aside. You know, I'd rather we had achieved some results out of it, such that now we would be just discussing, says, okay, here are the results. It's only that the only problem we have with it is that it costed a penny too much than what was expected. But the sad truth is that there is absolutely very little to write home about. I've listened keenly to the explanation by, I think, the project manager. And there's a big argument about the contracts and the kind of contract that we entered into, which is something we had alluded to earlier. And I think we had discussions about the same last week. It appears that the contractor is more keen on pushing the state to actually terminate so that they can get out of it. But the project manager is wondering, for what we have already paid, if we terminate, surely will we be able to get somebody to come on board and execute the remainder of the contract at the value that is still remaining, which calls to question the same thing that we had mentioned earlier on, Dibal, the people who draw these contracts between us as a country and some of these private entities. It is clear that these contracts are completely lopsided in favor of the foreigners, as opposed to protecting taxpayers' money. And I think in all this discussion about this Galana Kulalu and the ones for the dam that you're about to discuss,
yes,
it's about time that perhaps you call the state law office, either send you people to go and listen to their side of the story, because I know before Treasury commits pen to paper, there's preliminary approval from state law office to say this contract is sound, please go ahead and sign it. Why are they giving a nod of approval to such contracts? That will be my question, because in the long run, it appears every time there's a dispute, it is Kenya's, you can imagine 47 million Kenyans are negotiating from a point of weakness about their money with a foreign entity. I thought it should have been every time that there is a dispute, it should be the contractors pleading and saying, my rights are being trampled upon. But it appears in all these cases, Kenya as a state has an extremely weak hand as opposed to the contractors. All they are doing is once they get this mobilization fee, they scratch surface and disappear. So that you try chase them around the world, after a few while they introduce they throw in a few clauses that, oh, after all, even this contract says the following, please go ahead and cancel me. If you cancel them, what you have paid them is more than the work that they've done. And the remainder of the money is not sufficient to execute the remainder of the contract. Therefore, it calls to question about the people who do, who check on the wording of a contract. Who are these people and what is their motivation to enter the country into contracts that eventually the country ends up losing?
All right, let's hear from Motende or Mono.
I think Galana Kulalu is a classic case of creating a problem in order to solve it. Because we should not have created that problem in the first place. There are a lot of fundamental questions that it raises, and the first one is the issue of sovereignty of the people. This is one of those many projects where we only read about it, that the government has made the decision to invest so many billions, and there was no consultative process. And that is why, even when it fails, there are only issues and questions that are pending. No one seems to have the answer. Why was it conceived in the first place? Who conceived it? Why was that Israeli company, if it was indeed, contracted? What exactly was it supposed to achieve? Secondly, it also demonstrates this very sad idea of coming up with fantastic projects and fantastic ideas, many of which, because they are not consultative, end up being impractical. Why would we want to enter that level of magnitude of expenditure in order to produce maize when in the Rift Valley there are many farmers with hundreds and thousands of sacks of maize who are stuck and cannot sell? What exactly are we trying to achieve? Why not facilitate those who already have and get that maize than spend billions and billions on some fantastic idea of irrigating some semi-desert in order to feed the entire country? And we know that where maize is basically produced, where if the farmers are paid, and we forget about those who are conning, the farmers, if farmers are paid, we would not need all those kinds of things. Why don't we invest what is right where it is right, rather than just come up with these ideas? I think Kulalu Galana or Galana Kulalu is just one of those other mega projects that we are seeing, which was merely a conduit for siphoning money.
Right. And Boni Halwale, we may remember, I think the Agricultural Committee had actually raised question about Galana Kulalu then. And I think they were airlifted to, I can remember, to Mombasa, and the story changed completely. And they came here and they kept mum. If you may remember, the Agriculture Committee in the previous Parliament, they had raised question about Galana Kulalu. But it seems they were airlifted to Mombasa. Money was exchanged somehow, and the story changed completely. I know Jaco can remember that. I don't know if Senator Boni Halwale can remember also the story around Galana Kulalu. And now we are here. It's a damn squib.
We were on this panel when we were raising those questions, and I remember one, Senator Wamatangi and former Senator Mutahi Kagwe. They came out with their guns, both barrels blazing at the hips. When Jacoy and I,
if they have any,
yeah, when Jacoy and I were asking, what is this thing? Kulalu Kulana. And I recall,
Get the name right. Galana Kulalu.
No, I'm saying it deliberately because
they were struggling with the name then. Yeah, everyone was struggling.
I remember Professor Manyora reminding us that what that means in Luya. Kulalu. Not just a mad person, but a huge monster which is mad. So maybe we should leave it to Wamatangi to explain to us. And now that he has the benefit of hindsight, what does he have to say? But before he comes in, I think it's all lost. It's a question now of not looking around, but we go for the big answers from the most responsible people. We would like to hear the government spokesman tell the country what has become of the money that was invested in this project. Two, there is the PS in charge of agriculture, CS in charge of agriculture, then the line people who are involved in implementation of the project. I don't know what has happened now. During the Moi time, when some of us were up in arms against him as university students, the money that used to get lost those days used to be in tens of thousands of shillings. But today, it is 21 billion shillings for an empty ticket, another 15 billion for Kulalu Kulana, and billions and billions and billions. It looks like loss of public funds has become a way of life. And there is nobody raising the hard questions. Unfortunately, the oversight role of Parliament has collapsed because the opposition has become more government than the government. In fact, when you listen to Mbadi and Tienda Molo and Junet speak in Parliament, you cannot wish to watch parliamentary proceedings any more time. So the accountability questions are begging, and unfortunately, we are where we are. Over to Amatang.
Bonnie is setting you up.
Yes, absolutely, and you know, it's because he didn't have much material for that particular subject. But you know, Dibal, it's a reality that yes, indeed we sat here, we debated this at length, and when we did so, we did that with the information that we had at hand, and for that matter, I think then where we are now raises the same fundamental questions, and I think one of the panelists said that earlier. You know, in the course or between when we have made a decision, because in the first place, if you ask somebody or any person in this country, should we think about food security in this country? The answer is yes. Should we look for mitigating arrangements that in the event that there's a mismatch between the balance of what we consume and what we produce, that we should be able to mitigate that? The answer is yes. The question is how, and if the how then turns into that we have to be innovative in the first place to irrigate a part of this country and grow more food, then the question then boils down to then how do we do it? And I believe the main questions here will lie in these two areas, Dibal. First, when this project was mooted, decided upon, and then commissioned, which people were put behind it? Are they people with expertise to be able to manage or run such a project to its fruition? Secondly, is this Israeli company the only one company that would have been trusted to run such a project when such enormous amounts of money have been put in? And then this again goes down to the same question we're asking. Have we or are we creating projects, signing contracts which are tailor-made to fit probably either the instructions or the specifications of one either contractor or provider, such that then that provider ends up holding us at ransom to the extent that if they fail to perform or to continue, then we can't work anymore. And I believe that that's completely wrong. Two, would be asking, because it is public funds that were invested and have been invested, the most appropriate thing, and Dibal, it is the law of human nature, that you could start 100 projects, but you do not expect, or you might not expect 100% success in all of them. But if you're using public funds, then it is prudent, it is important that you also make or give full disclosure as to what are the reasons specifically that have made this project fail. Has there been corruption in it? Have people benefited? Is it technical? You know, the failure. You know, those facts. Just you know, the simple explanation of saying that the contractor has demobilized since last year in 2018 and is no longer willing. The contractor is saying that we've not been paid. That is not reason sufficient to satisfy the curiosity of members of the public as to how and why. Because if those are the only two reasons why a project of such magnitude, 5.9 billion, would be failing, then it's not believable. One would want to say, what are the real reasons that are making this then fail? And finally, then if it is owing to any person or people bringing us to such a situation, then are they going to be held culpable? But from the onset, you know, sitting down to plan, to think as government or even as leadership as to how you would mitigate certain scenarios, including balanced and adequate food security, is not wrong in its own content. It is then how you have run it. And I believe that this company, Green Arava, should also know that the monies that they have been paid in the past, although they might be saying now that they've not been paid, that money that were paid in the past is public money. It's taxpayers' money. And so they're also held responsible and culpable by our law, that they can't just take money, pocket it, and go away with no explanation. I believe we should, as a government, as a country, ensure that people are brought entirely to the table to answer those questions. And I think that's the only way would be saying that the people will be satisfied.
Right, thank you. Well, we want to take a short break. Sorry, Jacob, very briefly, we got a minute to go.
Get away with that. Wamatangi is a senator paid by public funds. He cannot say, I believe, I believe. What are they doing as the Senate to that county? You know, a project of that magnitude should be a subject of discussion in Parliament. What are they doing? Dibali, you rightly say that Boni Halwale and myself, we raised the issue of corruption. In fact, after that show, a member of Parliament confessed to me the dealings they had in Mombasa. They never even got there. They were in hotels and came back with a report.
They never went to the project.
They never went to the project. You know, that particular member of Parliament is today a senator, where Wamatangi and Cheriot sit. You cannot come on public television and lament, we should be doing this. Were they tailor-made? I mean, what are you doing on taxpayers' money? They should go there and say, enough is enough.
So the dealings in Mombasa was actually to gloss over the issues that were raised about Galana Kulalu.
Yes.
Which now it's emerging that, yes, this is a dumb squib. It's not yielding any fruit. How many years after it was actually commissioned?
Not to make excuse, but you should also not allow Jacoe to run away with his argument. I mean, he was also this project began in 2013. And what did he do about it in Parliament?
We questioned it. That is why we are walking your memory back to history.
Then your questioning did not amount to anything. If this report is anything to go by.
Because
all I'm saying is, your point is valid that Parliament needs to do better than what we are hearing about it. But I don't think you are the right person to make that argument.
No.
Maybe somebody who has never been to
Parliament.
Parliament.
No, I already made it.
Not you.
I already made it here, right here, at this particular hour, on this particular hour, in so many years ago. That time, when the report came to Parliament, we were being told by your people that there was tyranny of numbers. You couldn't do much. And you know the tyranny, one of the biggest problems in this country, is Jubilee killing Parliament. And now that, then because they want to transfer power to executive, we want to know who in the executive cobbled up this project. Because this is an executive theft project. Somebody must explain to Kenyans how a whole prime minister of Israel can come to Kenya, sit for hours in State House, and fly back. What did he come here to do? That is a public house. State House is not a lodging, which is private.
There was a tight schedule around him.
Yeah, we want to know what were they doing? What was Netanyahu doing in State House? I mean, But that's unusual. I have never seen anything quite like it. And now the taxpayer is left to pay somebody who only came to aid theft of public funds.
You know,
Right.
Dimal, at that time, at that time, Jacoyo
just a moment. Let's take a short
in the
break.
National Assembly.
Wamatangi.
And this matter was being prosecuted in the National Assembly. So really, and all those members of Parliament you said went to Mombasa, came back, and don't forget that Jacoyo was not just an ordinary member of Parliament. He had a position to whip.
He was in leadership.
He was in leadership. And so he
this.
cannot come here and start lamenting and
So
singing
Jacoyo-
songs of Jacoyo.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Please,
tell us.
allow us to take a short break.
It's true.
Please, let's take a station break. We'll be back with more on the other side of a break, looking at what is happening with Galana Kulalu. Is it a dam squib? That's a question that we're asking this morning. It's not yielded any fruit so far, and it's gobbled up billions of shillings so far. So don't go away, much more coming up on the other side of a break. You can see also the rush of tweets coming through. We shall be reading and sampling some of them in the course of the program. Welcome back. You're watching People and Politics here on AM Live, and we continue with the conversation on the war on corruption, looking at Galana Kulalu so far. Is it a damn squib? And we are actually listening from our panelists. We left Wamatangi. Now we pick up on Dr. Oteda Mkulu.
Yes, I think that there's something that needs correction. My friend Boni Halwale, and as you know, in recent times, today is done very well. He has not mentioned Raila. But usually starts with Raila.
It's still early in the day.
Then comes to Amolo. So he has succeeded in coming to Amolo and mentioning me alongside John Mbadi, Mohamed Junet, all of whom are leaders in Parliament. I have no such privilege yet. But what is important is that we must put matters in perspective. Hold on. I know you get excited, but it's my turn. Halwale has this habit of everything that is raised now, blaming it on Parliament and failure of oversight of Parliament, and running away from it all. Halwale was in Parliament for 15 years, the last of which he was in Senate. And he now says Parliament has failed, and since the opposition has joined government, there's failure of parliamentary oversight, and he talks as if we are government. And in truth, Halwale is more government than we are, because he's the chief court jester, and chief crier of the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya. He's closer to that seat than Otiende Molo as a member of Parliament. And so if there's anything to blame the government for, Halwale should be telling us, not telling us Parliament has failed in its oversight. I will tell you what we are doing in Parliament right now. But the three things that should be clear. One is all these scams that we are seeing begin at budget. All of them. Galana Kulalu, for it to be whatever he's calling Kulana, Galalu, or whatever, it was budgeted for and passed. He was in Parliament at the time.
And Jacoyo too.
And my brother Jacoyo.
Yeah.
And Senator Matangi. The issue of the budgeting and the scams at budget then must fall squarely there. Secondly, you must remember that agriculture is a devolved function. The primary entity that should deal with agriculture as a devolved function and money is under this is the Senate. Because under Article 96(1), the primary and the most primary role of the Senate is to protect the interests of the county government. And all this money come in the context of agriculture and in that particular county government. So Dr. Boni Halwale, Senator Wamatangi, would be telling us that being in the last Senate, what did they do about this? But I think what is important is this. What is important, and that's what we're doing now, is we should start looking at these isolated matters, 21 billion here, 11 billion there, 31 billion there. We should have a forest view of all this and ask ourselves, as we asked ourselves last week on NPAC, all these contracts that the government keeps entering into with shadowy foreign companies, which are very powerful and very present at the time of negotiation. But once they are paid and something goes wrong, then you cannot find their address of service, you cannot find a contact person, you cannot find anyone to hold accountable. In fact, it gets worse. It gets to a situation where, as was admitted to us just last week, a company has serious as what was called Otimofo,
Yes.
now it's called IDEMA, has entered into contracts worth billions to run our elections in 2 circles, and even right now are running some contracts for government, but they've never been registered in this country as a legal entity. By their own admission, they are now pursuing registration. And you will find that most of these companies are not even registered. So number one, you can't even pursue them, because for you to pursue somebody, it needs to be a natural person or a legal person. If you go to court, you can't take an association of village chicken sellers to court unless they're registered. So we need to re-examine the regime in terms of we should not do business with any person who's not legally registered in this country. Secondly, we must review all these contracts. You can see there were attempts, like now with the story we'll come to of the dams, where the AG was saying, you know, do due diligence and all. But the due diligence is being done 16 months after, you know, and that's the case with most of these others. And lastly, the excitement of running to foreign companies to give them contract is the greatest conduit to corruption, because most of those companies are not even companies where they are laid to be. They are just run by shadowy figures from this country who then claim that that's a foreign company and then, you know, give them contracts, and that money just comes back and circulates. And a lot of it, I'm afraid, is what goes into financing the elections in this country. I think that's what we need to re-examine.
Otiende, I've learned a new trick. Just a quick one. I've learned a new trick with Otiende. You heard he spoke for almost 30 minutes. But now I know, if you want to speak long, keep on saying secondly.
Now you're getting.
And then once you're done with everyone, he says now lastly. When I was listening to him, he said secondly 4 times. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was now that we have in the National Assembly, Otiende, now that we're in the National Assembly, and you have challenged us as senators, it's good now that we have sober people like you in the National Assembly. In the last National Assembly, where Jacoyo Mediwo was, and I'm not saying that he was not sober. It's only that if you're in the midst of so many drunk, sometimes you can get high also. But let me tell you, we could not even debate a single thing, because every time when an issue like that one came up, the first thing they did was to oppose that Senate has no business discussing anything that has been touched through the budget, anything to do with the money issue, and nothing about any project that is national. That was the issue. So when it comes to the Senate, you would find that there's a riot in the National Assembly then, that Senate is taking away their business. And that's why you find sometimes some of those key issues that would have been interrogated, because I agree with you to the extent that, for example, agriculture is a devolved function. There should have been a lot of debate on this in the Senate. But however, let's also be conscious and clear that when national government retains almost 3/4 of the amounts that have been budgeted, that those amounts also cannot be specifically only used for functions which have been only left to national government. National government must also play a part in functions, even if they are devolved, under the Constitution, in the umbrella of cooperation and coordination with the counter governments. So otherwise, a project like that one, once it has been mooted, should have been able to go through the entire scrutiny of the entire of Parliament, so that we're able to determine that this is a healthy project. But like I said earlier, as I finalize, and I'm not saying secondly, like
This is usually last.
You know, these people, the age.
This is lastly.
These people, the
Lastly,
age.
Wamatangi.
lastly, Dibale, as I said, we must learn to take the blame where it belongs. Because coming up with a project, deciding that it is good to work on something that is important to Kenyans is not wrong. But once we assign people to that role of managing such a project, and then they fail it for many reasons, including maybe possible corruption, and then we don't hold them to account, and we blame entirely the system or everyone involved or the concept itself, then you let people escape with the responsibility.
Thank you, Wamatangi.
I think we should learn something from Galana Kulalu. And that is that when the national government attempts to implement projects which, by the prescription of the Constitution, are supposed to be carried out by governors consequences will be what we have just said. I'm therefore afraid that even the big four, the issue of housing, the issue of health under the big four, these are fully devolved functions. So unless the national government is going to allow the money of those big four to be implemented alongside the prescription of the Constitution, i.e. to be driven by the governors, the consequences will be like what we have seen now. I just would like to appeal to my colleagues who are complaining about my insisting that Parliament can do better, to remember that when we were in Parliament, Jacob Mediwa and I, we played our role, and Kenyans saw, i.e. the scandals that were there at that time, Amolo, included Anglo-leasing, misappropriation of free primary education, the story of Grand Regency Hotel, and the tail end of Golden Bag. We articulated and prosecuted those scandals effectively, and Kenyans know this. What we are asking is that members of Parliament, the latter day scandals, SGR, NYS, the scandal at the Ministry of Health, Galana Kulalu that is there now, what is it that you guys are doing? Even if nobody's going to go to jail, at least Kenyans will know who amongst us cannot be trusted with positions of leadership. You are doing nothing. I'm not saying you're useless, but I'm saying that probably you're scared of holding the bull by its horns. And because we pay you and pay you very handsomely, we will continue demanding that you perform. Lastly, Otienda Malo, when you say Khalwale is more in government than you, please be reminded, Mimi ni raia. I'm not a village elder. I'm not an assistant chief, I'm nothing. Mimi ni raia huko Marinya. That's all.
It's called Otiende Amolo, not Otiende Wamalo.
I am very sorry.
All right.
I withdraw Wamalo. I said Amolo.
All right, we have also the rush of tweets coming through. We have Kiprona Abraham Arab Kogo saying, what is happening in Kenya is happening because our opposition died even before 2013 elections. There is urgent need to have a viable and objective opposition. We have also Abdallah Mdambo saying, what percentage has Galana Kulalu irrigation project contributed to the food basket since its inception? Economist Joe, government of Kenya is quick to invest in some white elephant projects instead of facilitating farmers to increase their produce using a fraction of the amount used in such grandiose ventures. That explains why we import even what we can produce. Also, we have Kennedy Omogi saying, who signs those contracts? Foreigners? He's asking. Or Kenyan businessmen disguised as civil servants? Right? Also, we have concerned Kenyan, Jubilee made a sober decision way back to sink Kenyans further into deep dark hole, be it Lapso, Galana Kulalu, dams, SGR, the list is endless, and now you hear zombies clutching onto the handshakes as though it's the cause of our problems. We are woke, he says. We have also Nicodemus Mwania saying, I knew things went out of way when the leadership kept mum about the much publicized Galana Kulalu project. Also, we have Kigotho Martins. In all these matters, corruption, the buck stops with the Jubilee leadership, the president and his deputy, fairly and squarely. Also, we have Kamau Gishimu saying, shame, shame, shame. A time is coming where God will punish all these government officials for swindling Kenyans. It's so unfair that there are no jobs, food, water, roads, taxes are high, small-scale businesses are suffering while government officials are swindling us sweat. Also, we have the Hook saying Jubilee is the biggest scandal since independence, biggest disaster since the Titanic. It's sinking and taken all of us down with it. And to think even Boni Mtetezi is seamlessly campaigning for Ruto, Jubilee, again, never. This is Hook who is saying this. Philip Mbithi Kiswi, Galana Kulalu was the biggest conduit for corruption. How does a country pump billions to farm a desert when farmers in our high-density agricultural areas are getting a raw deal from the same government? And also we do have Geoffrey Mutai saying that was a project for the high and mighty to fleece Kenyans. It's so absurd.